Ancient Egypt is one of the earliest known civilizations in human history. It emerged around 3100 BCE along the fertile banks of the Nile River. The Nile River was the lifeline of Egypt, providing water, fertile soil, and transportation. Ancient Egyptians depended on the annual flooding of the Nile for agriculture. Egypt was naturally protected by deserts on both the east and west sides. This geographic isolation helped Egypt develop a unique civilization with minimal invasions. The civilization of ancient Egypt lasted for over 3,000 years. Egypt was divided into Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. King Nama, also called Menes, is credited with unifying Upper and Lower Egypt. The unification of Egypt marked the beginning of the First Dynasty. Pharaohs were considered divine rulers, combining political and religious authority. Pharaohs were believed to be living gods on earth. They maintained law, order, and oversaw all major decisions of the kingdom. The Old Kingdom, from approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, is known as the Age of the Pyramids. Pharaoh Djoser commissioned the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the earliest large stone structure. The Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza is the largest pyramid in Egypt. The Giza pyramids are among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Pyramids were built as tombs to honor pharaohs and ensure their afterlife. Thousands of laborers, including skilled artisans and peasants, built the pyramids. The Sphinx of Giza, a lion with a human head, symbolizes power, wisdom, and protection. Mummification was practiced to preserve the pharaohs' bodies for the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was a collection of spells guiding souls through the afterlife. Ancient Egyptians worshipped a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses. Ra, the sun god, was one of the most important deities. Osiris was the god of the afterlife and resurrection. Isis was the goddess of magic, motherhood, and protection. Horus, the sky god, symbolized kingship and protection of pharaohs. Anubis presided over embalming, funerary rites, and the dead. Hieroglyphics was the formal writing system using pictorial symbols. Papyrus scrolls were used to record religious texts, literature, and official documents. Scribes were highly respected and trained extensively to maintain records. Egyptian society was hierarchical, including pharaohs, nobles, priests, scribes, artisans, farmers, and slaves. Agriculture was the foundation of the economy, producing wheat, barley, and flax. Irrigation canals helped channel Nile water to farmland. Cities such as Memphis, Thebes, and later Alexandria were centers of governance, religion, and culture. The Middle Kingdom, approximately 2055–1650 BCE, was a period of stability and cultural development. Pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom promoted arts, literature, and building projects. Trade expanded with neighboring regions, bringing in wood, spices, and luxury goods. The New Kingdom, 1550–1070 BCE, was the peak of Egyptian power and influence. Famous pharaohs of the New Kingdom included Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ramses II. Hatshepsut promoted trade expeditions and monumental architecture. Thutmose III expanded Egypt's empire through successful military campaigns. Akhenaten briefly introduced monotheism with the worship of Aten, the sun disk. Tutankhamun is known for his tomb, discovered intact in 1922 by Howard Carter. Ramses II, or Ramses the Great, constructed monumental temples such as Abu Simbel. Temples were not only religious centers but also administrative and cultural hubs. The Karnak and Luxor temples are examples of Egypt's impressive architecture. Obelisks were erected to honor pharaohs and commemorate victories. Ancient Egyptians advanced in medicine, performing surgeries and using herbal remedies. They understood anatomy and documented treatments for various illnesses. Mathematics helped in pyramid construction, land measurement, and astronomy. Egyptians developed a solar calendar of 365 days. Astronomy was used to predict Nile floods and for agricultural planning. Art and sculpture were symbolic and closely tied to religion. Egyptian paintings depicted gods, pharaohs, and daily life with precise conventions. Jewelry, pottery, and elaborate clothing were integral to culture and identity. Men wore linen kilts, while women wore long linen dresses and decorative jewelry. Both genders used cosmetics like kohl for eyes and perfumed oils for skin. Music and dance were central to religious ceremonies, festivals, and celebrations. Instruments included harps, flutes, drums, and sistrums. Egyptian literature included hymns, poems, wisdom texts, and stories about gods and pharaohs. Trade networks extended to Nubia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean. Egypt exported grain, gold, papyrus, linen, and crafted goods. Imports included cedar wood, incense, ivory, and other luxury materials. The Nile River facilitated transportation of goods, armies, and citizens. Boats were made from papyrus reeds or wood and propelled by sails or oars. The Valley of the Kings housed tombs of pharaohs and nobles in the New Kingdom. Tombs were decorated with scenes of daily life and journeys in the afterlife. Education focused on training scribes, who recorded history, laws, and religion. Pharaohs controlled religion, law, military, and taxation. Egyptian architecture demonstrated advanced planning, geometry, and labor organization. Pyramids were aligned with the cardinal points, showing advanced astronomical knowledge. Temples included shrines, sacred chambers, and spaces for offerings. Egyptian gardens contained plants, flowers, and ponds for decoration and ritual use. Women could own property, inherit wealth, and sometimes rule as pharaohs. Hatshepsut successfully ruled Egypt as a female pharaoh. Military campaigns expanded Egypt's territory and secured borders. Fortresses and garrisons protected Egypt from foreign invasions. Stone quarrying and transportation required complex labor organization. Cosmetics were used for religious purposes, protection, and social display. Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, represented the moral order. The afterlife influenced burial practices, tomb designs, and religious rituals. Mummies were accompanied by amulets, food, and treasures for the afterlife. Surgical tools included knives, scalpels, and probes. Herbs, honey, and minerals were commonly used for medicine. Astronomy aligned monuments with celestial bodies and seasons. Hieroglyphic texts recorded history, religious rituals, and royal decrees. Education included writing, mathematics, astronomy, and religious studies. Egyptian literature included poetry, hymns, and moral teachings. Goldsmiths, potters, and artisans produced intricate goods for temples and elites. Textiles made from flax were used for clothing and ceremonial purposes. Farming tools like plows and sickles improved crop productivity. The Nile Delta provided fertile land for large-scale agriculture. Fishing and hunting supplemented the diet with fish, birds, and game. Cattle, goats, and poultry were raised for food, labor, and ritual offerings. Bread and beer were staple foods in the Egyptian diet. Honey and dates were natural sweeteners in meals. Festivals celebrated gods, the Nile flood, and royal achievements. Processions, music, and offerings were key elements of religious ceremonies. Obelisks and monuments honored gods and recorded pharaohs' achievements. Tombs were carefully planned to prevent robbery and preserve sacred objects. Art followed strict conventions, with colors and sizes carrying symbolic meanings. Egyptian art influenced neighboring civilizations like Nubia, the Levant, and Greece. Temple walls depicted religious stories and pharaohs' accomplishments. Animals like cats were sacred and symbolized protection and divine favor. Craftsmen specialized in woodworking, stone carving, and metalworking. Astronomy helped plan agricultural cycles and align buildings. The pharaoh's tomb reflected status and contained valuable offerings. Egyptian achievements in architecture and culture influenced later civilizations. The Rosetta Stone helped modern scholars decode hieroglyphics. Egyptian religion included both state-sponsored cults and local deities. Temples housed priests, scribes, and stored offerings. The Nile itself was worshipped as a source of life and fertility. Cats were highly regarded and often kept in homes as sacred animals. The annual inundation of the Nile was celebrated with festivals and rituals. Egyptian crafts included pottery, jewelry, statues, and textiles for both practical and ceremonial use. Ancient Egyptians used ramps, levers, and sledges to move heavy stones. Temples and tombs often contained inscriptions explaining rituals and religious beliefs. Pharaohs were often buried with treasures to demonstrate wealth and status. The pharaoh's palace was a center of governance, administration, and diplomacy. Egyptians believed in magic and spells to protect themselves and their belongings. The Egyptian diet included bread, beer, vegetables, fish, and occasionally meat. Ancient Egyptians performed surgical procedures such as bone setting and wound stitching. The civilization developed advanced irrigation canals and water management systems. Hieroglyphs were used in religious, political, and cultural contexts. Education in Egypt was largely for the elite, especially scribes and priests. Egyptian clothing was made from linen, which kept people cool in the hot climate. Jewelry often had religious or symbolic significance. The pharaoh's army was organized into infantry, archers, and charioteers. Egyptian warfare included strategies like ambushes, chariot charges, and fortified cities. The New Kingdom period was marked by territorial expansion and diplomatic relations. Egyptian temples often contained large statues of gods and pharaohs. Obelisks often had hieroglyphic inscriptions praising pharaohs and gods. Pharaohs' names were written inside a cartouche to symbolize divine status. Ancient Egyptian art used a combination of profile and frontal views to depict humans. Colors in art carried meaning. Green symbolized life, red symbolized power, and black symbolized fertility. Festivals celebrated agricultural cycles, religious events, and royal anniversaries. Musicians played harps, lyres, drums, and flutes during ceremonies. Scribes recorded taxes, trade, agriculture, and historical events. Egyptians created maps and diagrams for land management and architecture. The ancient Egyptian legal system was guided by the pharaoh and the principle of Ma'at. Slavery existed, often consisting of war captives or debtors. The Nile facilitated communication, trade, and movement of armies. Ancient Egyptians created cosmetics like malachite for green eye paint. Women had legal rights to inherit property and run businesses. Pharaohs sometimes married siblings to maintain royal bloodlines. Religious rituals included offerings of food, wine, and incense to gods. The annual flooding of the Nile was seen as a divine blessing. Temples contained sacred pools, altars, and statues of deities. Egyptian architecture often incorporated massive stone columns, hieroglyphics, and relief carvings. The Great Pyramid was aligned precisely with the cardinal directions. Egyptians had knowledge of geometry for building pyramids and temples. Ancient Egypt had a sophisticated calendar system based on solar and lunar cycles. Temples were centers of learning and housed libraries of religious and scientific texts. The pharaoh's tomb included chambers for treasures, food, and offerings. Egyptian cities were organized with administrative centers, workshops, and temples. Farmers cultivated wheat, barley, flax, vegetables, and fruits along the Nile banks. Trade routes connected Egypt with Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean.